button. So we got to give it a quick, about 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds, maybe 7 seconds for the stream to get fired up across the internet. We're talking about Facebook and Twitch now. We're also on Periscope while it lasts. But YouTube always takes a quick minute to get started, but it looks like we're live. So let's get rolling. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system, with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. We've got a lot to get to today. I'm very grateful that you are here and with us. We're going to start off the show talking about Governor Andrew Cuomo out of New York. For about the past 2 weeks or so, he's been under a bit of a microscope about this nursing home situation. The allegations here are that in the height of the COVID pandemic, there was sort of a question in New York about what to do with people who were in nursing homes who had been diagnosed with COVID. They were transported to the hospitals. They were cared for there. And then there's allegations, there's rumors that Cuomo was sending them back into the nursing facilities, which of course is in hindsight not such a good thing. Now, many people are saying, well, even with foresight, back then this would have been a pretty obvious mistake. You don't send sick people back into a residential area where there's a lot of other high vulnerability people like we know old people are, right? The people who are more elderly have a higher probability of having some severe complications from COVID. So that's going on. We're going to break that down. We've got a New York Assemblyperson who is saying that he was bullied by Andrew Cuomo. A lot of, sort of back and forth going on out of New York. Mayor de Blasio is getting involved. We've got the spokesperson for the Governor Cuomo, goes by the name of Richard Azzopardi, who gave us a press release statement refuting some of the New York Assemblyman's claims. We're going to get into all of that. Then we're going to change gears a little bit. Got a couple quick stories that I want to just touch on. There is a Canadian pastor who was in custody very recently for continuing to hold services. And then when he went into court, the judge said, all right, we'll let you out, but you can't continue to do what you were doing. And he said, sorry, I can't agree to that. Hold me in jail, judge. I am only beholden to Lord, not you, Your Honor. And so the judge decided, all right, well, we'll keep you in jail. So we want to tell you a little bit more about that story. And then we've got another guy, sort of COVID related, who wants to actually go back into custody. So he was a wanted individual and he was sort of on the run. And he said, well, rather than stay at home with my family, I want to go back to prison because this lockdown stuff is so brutal. So we'll tell you about that story. And then we're going to spend a little time talking about Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin is the officer who had his knee on George Floyd's neck. He murdered George Floyd some time ago, mid last year, during the summer of unrest. And his trial, believe it or not, is scheduled for very soon, March 8th, I believe. So it's coming up in about 3 weeks. And Minneapolis is really bracing for the fallout of this trial, right? If he's acquitted, if he's found not guilty, it's not going to be good there. So they're bracing themselves, want to get you up to speed on what is going on with that trial. Also, some new discovery came out today. Not real sure what it is yet, but we have some hints. I want to bring you up to speed on that. Then we're going to be talking about this new bill, which is sort of sitting around in the House of Representatives right now. It's called the No Glory for Hate Act. Isn't that nice? H.R. 484, sponsored by a Democratic congressperson named Linda Sanchez over from California. And it's directed at certain former presidents. I wonder who that could be. So we're going to go through that bill. It's not long. It's about 4 pages. Before we get into any of this, though, I want to invite you to go and join us over at our locals.com/Watching the Watchers platform. A little bit different today. So we're going to, rather than taking all of the questions at the very end of the show like we have been doing, we're going to try something a little bit different. So we're going to try to go through one segment, and then Miss Faith is back there. She's clipping the questions that are most pertinent to that segment. So we're going to do the content, answer some questions that are a bit more relevant to what we just talked about, and then we'll move on to the next segment, do questions again, and so on and so forth throughout the show. So I know that we've gotten into the habit of saving your questions for the end of the presentation, but we're going to try to make it a little bit more fluid, a little bit more organic. Part of the issue here was we would get to the end of the show and people would be asking questions about stuff we talked about an hour and a half ago, and it's sort of kind of irrelevant. So we're going to try to stack things together a little bit more. I think it makes more sense. We're going to try it, see how it goes. So get those questions in sooner rather than later, and we're going to try to connect them with the segment that we're on. Locals.com/watchingthewatchers. You do have to support the show over there if you want to ask a question or leave a comment. You do not have to make a payment every time you want to ask a question. It's just a monthly membership subscription model over there, and once your questions are available, Ms. Faith will clip them, add them into the program, and we'll just continue on. All right, so let's get into it. As I mentioned, the first story today is surrounding Governor Andrew Cuomo, and there's news stories now that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn are actually investigating what's taking place out of New York. We haven't really spoken much about this story yet because it was just kind of, political bloviating back and forth. There was a long period of time where Andrew Cuomo was sort of glorified, deified almost in this country. I think he won some Hollywood award for something, wrote a book about leadership and, beating COVID and what a hero he was. A lot of people in the mainstream media, the sort of corporate media, were glorifying him. And he was sort of the counterweight to the president, to Donald Trump when he was still in office. And they would say, look, what an awful job Trump is doing. Cuomo over here, though, is doing an excellent job. And so they're sort of deifying him and putting him on a pedestal. Well, now that Trump's no longer there, now that they no longer sort of need this bludgeon, that they can sort of do this compare and contrast type of situation between the two individuals, well, the Cuomo is now under the sun. He's got a big microscope that is bearing down upon him. And it's all surrounding this nursing home situation where the allegation was that people who were sick with COVID, who were elderly, were being taken out of the nursing homes. They were being treated at hospitals and then being sent back into the nursing homes with active cases of COVID. Of course, that doesn't make any sense because the elderly population are very susceptible to serious repercussions if they catch COVID. So to send basically infected people back into the nursing home facilities was not a good idea, right? And I think that anybody back in that time would have made that distinction. I've been somebody who's been trying to be lenient on a lot of the politicians. COVID is something that is new. It is earth-shattering, right? The whole globe has come to a standstill over this thing. And so you can expect there to be mistakes being made as we go through the process. Now, you can pick which side of the aisle you're on, and I think the mistakes that you believe happened will sort of be in comportment with your ideology. But with Cuomo, I think people on both sides of the aisle are saying, what the heck were you doing sending sick people back into nursing homes? We knew basically from the very start of COVID that is not a good recipe. We knew that the elderly were the most susceptible to this thing, so just kind of didn't make much sense. But let's go through this story. Now we have the federal government that's doing a little bit of an investigation into what was going on. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. This story comes over from TimesUnion.com. It says U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, they have launched an investigation that is examining, at least in part, the actions of Governor Andrew Cuomo's coronavirus task force in its handling of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities during the pandemic. The probe by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York is apparently in its early stages, and it's focusing on the work of some of the senior members of the governor's task force, according to a person with direct knowledge. As we publicly said, this is a quote from the DOJ. The DOJ has been looking into this for months. So this is a quote, from Andrew Azzopardi, a spokesman for the governor. We said publicly, the DOJ has been looking into this for months. We have been cooperating with them. We will continue to do so. Azzopardi did not disclose whether any members of the administration have been interviewed or if they've been served with any subpoenas. And so, it's sort of, yeah, we're acknowledging that this investigation is taking place. We know that it's going on, but that's kind of it for as far as information comes about the details from the governor's spokesperson. Nearly 3 weeks after the governor's task force was announced last year, the State Department issued an order directing nursing homes and other long-term care facilities that they must accept residents who were being discharged from hospitals, even if they were still testing positive for the infectious disease, so long as they were able to care for them properly. That directive, which was rescinded less than 2 months later, has been the focus of a firestorm of criticism directed at Cuomo, including allegations that the order, which the governor said was based on federal guidance, had contributed to the high number of fatalities of nursing home residents in New York. The assertion was largely dismissed in a report by the Department of Health that was released in July. The controversy boiled over again last week when DeRosa, in a closed-door meeting with Democrats in the state legislature with the authority to subpoena and investigate the governor's administration, told the group the administration had withheld information lawmakers had requested on nursing homes for months due to the Justice Department's inquiry. And we had spent some time talking about the original report that came out from Letitia James, the Attorney General out of New York, and she basically, her office there, did an independent audit, and they were analyzing the numbers, and they were saying, well, I think that there were actually more people who were sort of under the purview of this order, because remember, who died under this order. I mean, directly died as a result of this sort of negligence. I think the original misunderstanding here, or the misconnection, or the lies in terms of the reporting of the numbers, the differential was there are certain ways to count people. And what Governor Cuomo, allegedly, according to Attorney General Letitia James, was doing was saying that if they were in a nursing home with COVID and they died in the nursing home with COVID, then they would count that as a nursing home fatality. That was a COVID death. But if they were in a nursing home and they got really sick and they needed to be hospitalized, well, then they would send them out of the nursing home. And if they died in the hospital, then they would say that was not a nursing home death. That was a hospital death. And so Letitia James goes back with the Attorney General's office, and she says, well, that was like half the deaths. And many people are saying, well, if they were in a nursing home and they caught it and they died elsewhere, that should still be a nursing home death because they caught it in the nursing home. We're trying to identify the source of where the disease came from. Where they died is sort of irrelevant. And if that number was a lot higher than what the governor's office was reporting, well, the public should know that, because some of those deaths likely could be attributable to what was the governor's order, which is to send infected people back into the nursing homes. And so you can see why this is so acidic. This is not good governance. And if the governor's office is trying to cover up for their own negligence, you can see why people are up in arms about it. Now, so there's more information coming out that the governor was basically going around and threatening people if they were sort of coloring outside the lines. This story came over from Breitbart.com. It says NY Assembly, so the New York Assemblyperson here. Okay, Assemblyperson. Let's get rid of that. Cuomo threatened to destroy me after nursing home scandal. Kim is the name of the Assemblyperson. Kim, who was publicly accused of Cuomo of lying about key aspects of the nursing home cover-up, told CNN that the Democratic governor called him directly and threatened his career. Quote, if I did not cover up for Melissa and what she said. He tried to pressure me to issue a statement, and it was a very traumatizing experience. We're going to hear from Kim here in a minute. We got a clip of the video, 2 clips. Cuomo, said Kim, continued to threaten his career, telling him that, quote, we're in this business together and we don't cross certain lines. And he said that I hadn't seen his wrath and that he can destroy me. That's nice, Kim said, adding that no man has ever spoken to him in that manner in his entire life. At some point, he tried to humiliate me, asking, are you a lawyer? I didn't think so. You're not a lawyer. It almost felt like, in retrospect, he was trying to bait me and anger me and say something inappropriate. I'm glad I didn't. Kim's wife told CNN that she had overheard part of Kim's phone call with the governor, described the governor as loud and angry. She said she heard Cuomo say, who do you think you are? As well as words, my wrath, and that immediately after the phone call, her husband told her the governor threatened to destroy my life. So, the question about this stuff is how much of this was going on around the country? How often was this sort of standard operating procedure? Get in line, toe the party talking points, or we're gonna wreck you, right? That's it. And I'm gonna guess it's probably pretty prevalent, right? I feel like we saw a lot of this type of stuff going on. Sometimes people would come in and they would be a little bit skeptical about COVID or about the lockdowns or about the validity of what we were doing to deal with this thing. There'd be a little bit of skepticism, and then boom, a week later, we got to lock down everything. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The whole thing's a meltdown, right? So somebody got a nice talking to, and we saw that in the law as well. And we've seen this very regularly. We've seen sort of the orders come down from on high. And one of the best examples I can give you on this is, we had a mask mandate here in Arizona for some period of time, and then all of our individual cities started to impose their own individual mask mandates. And at some point, the police officers here in Scottsdale, they got a phone call and they said, go enforce the mask mandate, right? It was sort of a political call, because I know this because I got calls from a number of other small business owners around the valley and around Scottsdale, our offices in Scottsdale, and they're texting me, blowing up my phones. Hey, Scottsdale PD showed up at my gym today. Scottsdale PD showed up at my hair salon today. Scottsdale PD showed up at my restaurant today. What is going on? And it was basically within the same about 48 hours, right? So somebody got a call from, the city council made a call to the police department, or the mayor made a call, or something happened, and they said, well, people aren't complying with the mask mandates, go enforce them. Cops show up. Most of the cops, according to my friends, were not even wearing masks. They're just like, yeah, we're here, whatever. It's sort of a knock and announce type of proceeding where they were just doing the show of force all around the city of Scottsdale. And it was a political thing, right? It was somebody was not happy about the mask not being worn. They wanted to go out and do this big show of enforcement. And so a lot of this same stuff, I think, is being done sort of, up at the higher levels. People are having conversations about this stuff, and it's being done not out of a conversation about science or efficacy or whether this stuff works. It's about making political statements and sort of virtue signaling to those around you that this is how things are going to be done. And if you do not comply with us, there will be repercussions for you. And so this, New York Assemblyman was trying to say, hey, we've got some serious concerns. I think we can change course. I think there are ways that we can handle this better. And then he gets a call from Cuomo that says, shut your mouth, fall in line, or I will literally destroy your career. How much of that was going on, and how many people are dead because of that, because of this political bloviating that we see all around the country? This article goes on. Cuomo, Kim said, continued to reach out to the assemblyman, telling the outlet that he received multiple calls from a no-caller ID number, followed by messages from Cuomo aides saying that the governor would like to speak with him again. He did not comply. He instructed Cuomo's office to communicate through his counsel, which he hired as a result of the first conversation, which is a pretty big deal. If somebody is really rattled that badly, and they go hire an attorney, in my opinion, that just adds a lot of credibility to that. He's not going to take this abuse anymore. Cuomo, you want to call again? Talk to his attorney. He's tired. He's not going to take this type of harassment. He's got counsel involved now. And so he's taking some affirmative steps to make sure that he's not the victim of continued abuse from the governor. He goes on. Cuomo's office, however, denies that the governor threatened to destroy him. Cuomo's senior advisor, Azzopardi, told CNN, Kim's assertion that the governor said he would destroy him is false. The governor has 3 witnesses to the conversation. The operable words were to the effect of, I am from Queens too, and people still expect honor and integrity in politics, Azzopardi said in a statement, which we have. Cuomo since detailed what he described as a long and hostile relationship with the Democrat assemblyman. And the New York Post quoted Kim in its original story, which blew the lid off the administration's nursing home cover-up. So, they've been sort of adversarial for some period of time. The article centered around an admission made by Melissa DeRosa, New York's secretary of the governor, who admitted that the administration covered up the magnitude of the coronavirus-related fatalities in nursing homes out of a fear of a federal investigation. Kim, who was on the call in question, said it sounded as if the administration, quote, admitted that they were trying to dodge having any incriminating evidence that might put the administration or the health department in further trouble with the Department of Justice. That's how I understand the reasoning of why they were able to share in real time the data, he told the Post, adding they had to first make sure that the state was protected against federal investigation. So, not only do we have some negligence, it sounds like, in the original order, but once the damage was being done, now you've got a cover-up, which makes it really bad, right? Originally, the idea that you would send infected people back into a nursing home is sort of asinine to me. I think that probably most people would not have made that decision. Just guessing, I don't know. Certainly, we were not in Andrew Cuomo's shoes. Maybe they had no choice. Maybe there was no alternative. I don't know, but didn't sound like a good idea. Actually, for a long period of time, I was saying that the elderly were basically the only people who should be locked down and secluded, and the rest of society, I know there's a lot of criticism about this concept, but my sort of opinion was that the rest of society who is healthy, younger, not subject, in that sort of very low risk pool, why are we locking them down? Why are we locking everybody in this country down? Didn't make much sense to me. But certainly the elderly needed to be protected, secluded. They should get all the PPE. They should get all of the vaccines. We should sort of identify the highest risk categories of individuals in this country and make sure that they get the care. The other low risk individuals, if they want to go dancing, go to the bars, go to these types of things, all right, that's fine. If they're not afraid of COVID, that's okay, right? Let them go do that stuff. But that was just one person's perspective. So to me, it seemed obvious, but again, I wasn't the governor of New York, so maybe it wasn't as obvious for him at the time. So you can give him a little bit of leeway on that. Okay, not if you lost somebody, not if you lost your mother, father, brother, sister, family member, right? You're probably not going to have a lot of sympathy for Cuomo, but you can understand that in the middle of a crisis that you maybe make a bad decision, and it's difficult to fault somebody for that. If they're trying their best and they make a bad decision, it's just a bad decision. But when you try to cover it up, now we're talking about malfeasance. Now we're talking about negligence to a whole different degree. We're talking about, literally trying to sort of sweep all of this under the rug. And that is where I think some criminality may come into play. So now the FBI is involved. Now the U.S. attorney is involved. And we have Ron Kim here, the New York Assembly member, who said that he was the subject of this phone call with Cuomo. Here he is on MSNBC last night detailing more about the conversation.
Governor Cuomo tries to implicate you in the cover-up or threatens your livelihood if you don't lie for him. And that's what happened to me in the last 1 week. I was one of 6 lawmakers in that private meeting for 2 hours with Secretary DeRosa when she accidentally told us the truth, that there was a cover-up and fear that the information would be weaponized against Governor Cuomo. That moment, I had to tell the truth, and I had to let the public know what happened. And Governor Cuomo called me the next day at 8 p.m., while I was about to bathe my kids. I was with my wife, and for 10 minutes, he berated me. He yelled at me. He told me that, my career will be over. He's been biting his tongue for months against me. And I had tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, to issue a new statement, essentially asking me to lie, and asking me, like, I heard and I saw a crime the other day. And he's asking me that I did not see that crime. And that was the line that a line that he crossed that can't be undone. And that's why I had no choice but to come out and speak up. As the chair of the Asian Committee in the State Assembly, it's my job to investigate. It's my job to ask these tough questions, and I shouldn't be punished for doing my job.
No, he shouldn't. And I'm a big fan of whistleblowers like that. When you see government malfeasance and you stand up and speak about it, you're sort of on the inside. I think that those people are largely heroes in this country. I've said the same thing about Snowden. I've said the same thing about Assange and other people. The people who are on the inside, who bring to the public's attention that this type of stuff is actually going on, I think are heroes. And they're critical to making this country function, because we cannot have our leaders just engaged in endless mounds of corruption and nobody report on it. And so I'm glad that this guy came to the forefront of all this and is telling us really what the conversation was and what happened. Here is one more clip of him last night.
I mean, it was loud enough for my wife to hear, and I tried to shield her, but she was in shock. She didn't get any sleep that night, and we were terrified. And, he left a shocking moment for all of us in our family. And I think every day Governor Cuomo and his team defends many different versions of the truth. While lawmakers like me, we're tasked to pursue the constant singular truth behind what happened in our nursing homes. And the truth is this: Governor Cuomo allowed his top donors to write business-friendly policies like legal immunity for nursing homes, and he ordered the state government to cover life and death information, and took away our ability to legislate and change the outcomes of this pandemic. That's what happened. When you don't have the full data, how could we actually know what the problem is? And we could have potentially saved lives by intervening early and legislating. And he took that away from us. And instead of talking about that, he's distracting us and punting this and making up lies. And that's what his team is very good at doing. And it's unfortunate, but it's still not too late. And I hope he can still work with us in getting to the truth, because there's 15,000 people who lost loved ones in New York. And that's what's at stake. It's not about me. It's not about the governor. People forget this is about the families. This is about people who survived COVID. They still have healthcare issues. How are we going to take care of them with the extra healthcare costs? How are we going to get justice for those families? That's what we need to be focused on. And I hope we can get there soon.
Yeah. And, you can, if you're a politician, it's sort of part of your job operations, right? It's part of your procedure. It's your job description that you're going to go out there and you're always going to try to puff yourself up, and you're always going to try to take advantage of a crisis, and you're always going to want to be the leader, sort of rip your shirt open and show that you're Superman and that you're going to solve all of the world's problems. And so Governor Cuomo was doing that, right? I mean, he was sort of at the forefront of this stuff. We saw all of his press conferences day after day after day, almost sort of in parallel to what Trump and his team was doing with the coronavirus. And so, the media just needed sort of a counterbalance to what Trump was doing, and Cuomo fit the bill. And he was loving it up, lapping it up, got these awards, got all of these, the book deal and whatever. I think there was a poster made about him and how New York is so great. Okay, we can understand that is part of the job duty of a politician. But this is not the right crisis for that. Okay, if something happens, if a tanker explodes or something and there's not an ongoing crisis, go stand there by the burning building and we're going to prevent this and we're going to help all the victims and all of that stuff. But what Cuomo was doing was bloviating to the point where he had to create this narrative. He had to create this image that everything was under control and he was doing everything right. And so, people who were really in charge of writing rules and passing laws that could move the needle on solving the coronavirus crisis, like this guy, apparently, right? We don't know what his solution was or whether his involvement would have changed the course of any of this stuff. But the point here is that his hands were tied. He was not able to go out there and do his job as an assembly person, somebody elected with a constituency to represent. It sounds like the governor just sort of stonewalled everybody, said, we're taking charge of this. So if they want to do that, well, they got to take some of the ramifications of that. If there were, and it sounds like there were, an extra thousands and thousands of deaths in New York because of Cuomo's actions, well, if he wanted all the praise, he wanted all the glory from it, well, you got to take some of the bad parts as well. Those repercussions are coming his way, and Ron Kim is bringing those to light, and I think that he should be commended for that. So this is what the governor's office is responding with. Statement from the senior advisor to the governor. We're talking to Rich Azzopardi. He said, Mr. Kim is lying about his conversation with Governor Cuomo last night. I know because I was one of 3 people in the room when the phone call occurred. At no time did anyone threaten to destroy anyone with their wrath nor engage in a cover-up. That's beyond the pale. It is unfortunately part of a years-long pattern of lies by Mr. Kim against this administration. We did ask for Mr. Kim to do the honorable thing and put out a truthful statement after he told the governor he was misquoted in a news article, which he said he then tried to correct, but the reporter refused. Kim said that he would correct the story and then broke his word. No surprise. Instead, over the last 6 days, he has baselessly, there that word is again. Can we get some new words here, folks? Accused this administration of pay to play and obstruction of justice. These continued falsehoods are why the governor chose to speak out today. We will not allow an unscrupulous politician to deceive New Yorkers or distort the truth. Mr. Kim's current statements do not even align with the comments he made at the meeting. See below. He is without credibility, as his own words demonstrate. Lies have caused families grieving from COVID enough pain. We understand it is our obligation to correct misstatements so families understand the true facts during COVID. So we got the second part of his statement here, but basically it's kind of devolving into a he said, she said situation. Governor was on, I was there, 3 people were there. We didn't say that. Kim saying, no, I was there. I heard it. My wife heard it. I went and hired an attorney afterwards and said, I'm not talking to the governor anymore. All right. So you can sort of weigh the credibility as you will. Pick which side you think makes more sense. Now, we also have sort of a corroborating report from the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, who says, there's some pretty big problems here. The governor's numbers, the Department of Health, they don't really match with what we think the true numbers are. They're counting them in a way that affords them an extreme benefit of the doubt, one that is really not justified. So this is the second part of the governor's statements. Mr. Kim and the governor's office have had a long hostile relationship. The animosity initiated when Mr. Kim supported a bill protecting nail salon workers, only to do a 180-degree reversal after he received significant funding from the owners of nail salons. All right, so now it's sort of throwing mud at each other. All right, so now he's sort of making sure that that this guy is bought off by nail salons, apparently. He was criticized by good government groups at the time. Mr. Kim continued to receive funding from nail salon owners, continues his attempt. Okay, so it's an ongoing, unethical situation. He's receiving funding from owners. Nail salon. We believe Kim continued his pay-to-play actions. To be clear, neither the governor nor his aides threatened any legislators at this meeting. It was considered positive by those who attended. It is distortions on the meeting. So all this is just sort of throwing mud, so you can factor that in. On the merits, Mr. Kim and the New York Post and Republicans argued that the state's 25th March order on nursing homes was bad policy. What they failed to mention is the state was following federal policy, and if the Post and Republicans want to play a political game, they should blame Donald Trump, and they should have blamed Donald Trump since March 25th when they promulgated the guidance. We will stick to the facts. So, I don't know. Did Donald Trump tell the United States to send sick nursing people back into nursing homes? I missed it, but maybe that is accurate. I don't know, but I think this is a New York isolated incident. I'm not hearing this same story all around the country: California, Arizona, Florida. The flyover country, right in the heartland of America. Was anybody else sending sick people back into nursing homes? I don't know. Maybe. We've got here, though, Republicans in New York are not happy about it. They're going to be investigating. A group of 9 Republicans on Wednesday asked the Senate Judiciary Committee to investigate Governor Cuomo's administration over what they call a cover-up, which is good. So if we're in a situation where it's he said, she said, Ron Kim says, nope, the governor said it. The governor says, nope, we didn't say it. I got my witnesses. You got your witnesses. Letitia James has her interpretation of the event. All right, so let's investigate it. Just go on, investigate everything. There's probably a lot of open meeting rules in New York. I don't know, but subpoena some emails, take a look at some phone records, open up the book so we can see what really went on here. The group, led by Senator Ted Cruz, wrote a letter calling the committee's chair, Senator Dick Durbin, to launch the probe after Cuomo's top aide told lawmakers the administration purposely withheld the state's nursing home death toll from federal prosecutors. Cuomo first addressed this episode on Monday this week, declined to apologize. Of course, apologize. Look, I have said repeatedly, we made a mistake in creating the void. The void allowed misinformation and conspiracy. And now people are left with the thought of, did my loved one have to die? And that is a brutal, brutal question to pose to a person. And I want everyone to know everything was done. Everything was done by the best minds and the best interest. And the last thing we wanted to do, the last thing that I wanted to do was aggravate a terrible situation. So apparently the void allowed misinformation and conspiracy. So sick of this stuff. So sick of it. Anything that goes against a politician's political disposition is now misinformation and a conspiracy, or it's not, or it's just information and it's just an opinion. But we're seeing more and more of this language just across the board from everybody. Any position, any question, any inquiry is misinformation. It's dangerous misinformation, and it's also a conspiracy. All right. On Wednesday evening, former President Donald Trump addressed the scandal. He said, I look at it, and it's surprising what happened in New York, and we did. We gave Cuomo him the Javits Center. We gave him the ship, the great hospital ship, and essentially they weren't used. Spent a lot of money, and they weren't used. You could have the patients go there. You could have people go. It would have saved a lot of lives. It's too bad. It is, right? It is too bad. And hopefully they get to the bottom of it. Here is the letter, as I mentioned, that Ted Cruz is sending over to Chairman Durbin. This was dated yesterday, sent over to the Honorable Dick Durbin over at the Senate Committee on the Judiciary over in Washington, D.C. He says, Dear Chairman Durbin, last week, New York Post reported that Melissa DeRosa, a top aide to the Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, told New York a state of lawmakers that Governor Cuomo and his senior staff engaged in a deliberate cover-up regarding New York's nursing home COVID-19 death. In a shockingly candid confession, she stated, we were in a position where we weren't sure if what we were going to give to the Department of Justice or what we give to you guys, what we start saying was going to be used against us while we weren't sure if it was going to be an investigation. So kind of a jumbled sentence there, but basically we don't know what to give to you because we don't want the Department of Justice to come in and investigate us. Got it. According to the New York Times, this confession is the latest instance in the governor's almost year-long attempt to brush away criticisms that his policies had allowed thousands of nursing home residents to die of the virus because such criticisms would undermine his national image. Right? It's all about the image. In the early stage of the pandemic, the administration issued a March order. We already know all about that. Facilities had admitted nearly 6,000 COVID-19 patients directly from hospitals. We now know the Cuomo administration actively concealed the level of admissions and then intentionally underreported these admissions in a way that callously and recklessly put facility residents in danger and resulted in an unknown number of deaths. The Associated Press reports now the number of admissions was greater than 9,000, 40% higher than what the State Department previously released. The report also stated that the number of deaths had been underreported by as much as 50%, resulting in thousands of COVID-19 nursing home deaths that were not being reported properly. And that was the Letitia James statement, right? This was where they were saying that if you died in the nursing home, we count that. But if you died in the hospital and you were just transported out of the nursing home, we don't count that one. That's not a nursing home death. Letitia James came back and said, yeah, it is. Okay, you can't, when somebody's on their deathbed in a nursing home, you can't just ship them out and then claim that that didn't happen in a nursing home. That's not particularly ethical. Such underreporting hid the truths. There are many people who needlessly lost their lives. Those who deliberately withheld or directed others to withhold material information from the Department of Justice may be guilty of obstruction of justice, violating the False Claims Act, and numerous other criminal violations. When Judge Garland testifies before this committee, we expect him to commit the Department of Justice to fully investigating this cover-up to determine whether any criminal laws were violated, to prosecute any violations. An investigation is rightly conducted behind closed doors. We will not provide timely and public accountability to those who played politics with COVID-19. And then this is the last page. We ask you to open an investigation. As you've stated before, the Senate Judiciary Committee, through its history, played a critical role in investigating violations of civil rights, overseeing the Department of Justice, holding hearings, and on and on and on. Signed by Ted Cruz. We also have Chuck Grassley, and then we got a number of other ones. Lindsey Graham's in the House, Mike Lee, Tom Cotton, Marsha Blackburn, Tom Tillis, Josh Hawley, John Cornyn, all signing off on it. So the Republicans are now diving into it fully, and he's catching it from all sides. You got the Republicans in Congress, the senators. You've also got Mayor de Blasio, who's saying, well, this is just classic Cuomo bullying. And, these two have not gotten along too well, historically speaking, but they're both Democrats. They're both from the state of New York. And so, to see sort of intra-party fighting means that maybe there really is kind of something there, as we're seeing in the Republican Party. We're seeing a massive division there as well. So this is interesting. Let's take a look at this quote, this video from last night on MSNBC.
It's a sad thing to say, Mika, but that's classic Andrew Cuomo. A lot of people in New York State have received those phone calls. The bullying is nothing new.
All right.
Ron Kim, and it's very, very sad. No public servant, no person who's telling the truth should be treated that way. But yeah, the threats, the belittling, the demand that someone change their statement right that moment, many, many times I've heard that, and I know a lot of other people in this state have heard that.
All right, so there's another one from Governor Cuomo, who says his response to this, apparently, I'm not sure when this one was released. This looks like it came back out about 18 days ago on January 29th from the New York Post. Cuomo callously addresses the COVID nursing home report, saying, who cares? Who cares if they died in a hospital, died in a nursing home? They died. That's how he callously responded on Friday to a damning state attorney general's report that revealed his administration downplayed the total number of nursing home residents killed by COVID-19.
A third of all deaths in this nation are from nursing homes. New York State, we're only about 28% only, but we're below the national average in number of deaths in nursing homes. But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
Well, I think a lot of people do actually care about that, because if it's if they died and they didn't need to die because you issued an order that sent sick people into nursing homes, let's say we have a nursing home that does not have any remnants of COVID in there and everything is fine and well until your order comes down and suddenly the hospitals are just shipping people who are sick into the nursing home, and somebody who otherwise would not have caught COVID now catches it as a direct result of your order and they die, people are going to care about that. Okay, it's negligence at minimum, it's criminality at the maximum. And so, to sort of poo-poo this stuff and just kind of put it by the wayside, I think is in fact calloused, and it's not something that he is going to get away with. As we can see, a lot of people are up in arms about this stuff, as they should be. All right, so we got a couple questions that came in. First one from Sharon Quidney says, Robert, couldn't this be a big class action lawsuit in the making? Probably, yeah. I'm not a class action lawyer, but I do know some of the basics. You need sort of a commonality of claims. You need sort of a group. In other words, the remedy needs to fit the entire group of the class, and there's a certification of the class and all of those different, there's I think 4 or 5 different requirements, and I think it would meet all of those. And in this case, the government was negligent at minimum or grossly negligent, and it's arguable that Governor Cuomo, his direct order, led to additional deaths of people who maybe didn't need to die. So I think that certainly if you are in New York and you are somebody who lost a loved one as a result of a nursing home, I think you could probably go back and just take a look at the evidence. Was this nursing home one of the nursing homes that got mandated to take in sick individuals? If they were, there's sort of causation there, right? There's a direct chain from your loss back to the governor's order. And I'm going to guess that, 9,000, 6,000 people, whatever the final death tolls were, they may be able to consolidate their claims and bring a substantive class action. Good to see you, Sharon. We got Ma Fox says the amount of wrongful death lawsuits could literally bankrupt New York City for the next decade. They're already having huge budget problems. Interesting, Ma. I didn't know that about the budget, but it makes sense. I mean, I think people are fleeing New York. People are fleeing California. People are trying to sort of escape the lockdowns. I'll tell you, here in Arizona, we have a massive influx of people coming here because we're kind of open and we're not frozen. It's very interesting what's happening to some of these big cities. And in New York, right, if your entire population is fleeing because of COVID and because of the lockdown orders and because of some of these restrictions, well, your tax base is just gone. It's just gone with the wind. And that's going to be a big problem. And so if there was a class action, if there was a lawsuit or wrongful death lawsuits, this could have very, very long-lasting repercussions for the entire state. And in this situation, you can understand why the governor might want to cover this up, might want to sort of make sure that all of this is swept under the rug. I don't know why people in government think that they can do that these days. I mean, everything is sort of under scrutiny, especially in a situation like this. And it's just been weird how the narrative shifted on this one. So it's a very good point, Mom. Thanks for chiming in on that. What did I just do? All right. So we got another one here from Just XUXA says, so if Janice Dean would be involved, I'm sure she lost both in-law parents. If so, Janice Dean would be involved. I'm sure she lost both in-law parents. Yeah, it's awful. I mean, people are dying all over this country at a very fast pace. It's awful. It's very sad. And, if there was some level of criminality here from Cuomo to cover it up, like I said, I'm a little bit more lenient on the original mistake. I can understand making an original mistake, but you also got to own up to that. And when you start covering stuff up, now you're introducing a new element of malfeasance into the original wrong. It's like, two wrongs sort of stack on top of each other. We have Sharon Quidney says, all this politicization of everything not only infringes on people's rights and personal liberties, in this case, it's also cost people's lives. When is enough going to be enough? Yeah. And that was exactly the point that I was making, right? It's okay if a politician wants to go and read a book to the kindergarten kids. Okay. Nobody believes he's actually getting enjoyment out of that. Hey, little Johnny, let's learn about the ABCs today. You think Cuomo cares about that or Trump cares about that? I don't. But they're doing it because it's part of their public image. It's part of their public persona. They got to puff themselves up as politicians. And that's what politicians do when you have a crisis. And so Cuomo was really basking in the limelight, and unfortunately, people were dying as a result of that. So sort of one of the more egregious types of governmental misconducts. We have this from Nadarb Lasir says, will Fauci finally be questioned on his decisions during this whole pandemic? Fauci holds up New York as a model for fighting coronavirus. They did it correctly. That story came over from Yellen Dasanova. That was posted back on July 18, 2020. And, Fauci, I don't understand the admiration with Dr. Fauci. I have heard him change his opinions like 10 times. I think I have a list in my phone that I just started writing down. Oh, it used to be this. Now it's this. Now it's that. Now it's this one. And you just go, what? I thought he was supposed to be an expert. Is there a methodology to this thing or not? Or all of you just making it up on the fly? Because that's what it feels like. And if that's the case, that's okay. But you got to tell us about it. Okay, you can't tell us that masks don't work, then masks work. Now, double mask. What are you talking about? Then, lockdowns are great for you until the World Health Organization says they're not so great because they're disadvantaging the poor. All right, so what should we open back up now? What do you want to do? Vaccines work, but you still have to be quarantined after the vaccines are in place. What are you talking about? So the whole thing is certainly messy, but I certainly, I don't think that Fauci will be held accountable for any of this stuff because he's just a doctor and he's just trying his best and he's trying to do what basically the establishment wants done. He's the spokesperson for that. And they say, go out there and say, put a mask on. All right, go out there, put a mask on. Go out there and say, don't put a mask on. All right, I'll go out there and say, don't put a mask on. And just around and around we go. Watching You Daily says, didn't Whitmer do the same as Cuomo? Good question. I don't know. Watching You Daily. I'm not real sure about that. Maybe. Right, maybe. I just don't know. I haven't seen the headlines on that, but if Cuomo goes, then maybe they're coming after her next. It just didn't make much sense to me either way. I mean, why would you know that the elderly are very vulnerable. Why would you send sick people to the most vulnerable population? We have Nadarb says, This is going to be a tough one. It's either C or D, going to say C, final answer. The question being, best place to treat COVID-19 patients. A, hospital. B, Navy hospital ship. C, nursing home. D, retirement home. Well, that's going to be a tough one. It's either C or D. Cuomo says it's going to be C, final answer, nursing home. We're sorry. That's the wrong answer. We were looking for A or B. Nursing home or the hospital ship. Retirement home, not so good. Nursing home, definitely not the right answer. You're out. Thanks for playing, Cuomo. Then we have over here, Realtor Patty says, Tramp said in last night's interview, he sent Cuomo a medical ship to New York. He didn't use it. Yeah, and we just saw that clip over there from, I think Miss Faith clipped that in one of our slides. So, there are alternatives to this stuff. But sending sick people back into the elderly centers seemed to me to be just kind of obviously a bad idea. Thank you, Realtor Patty, number 14. Then we have Just XUXA says, Michigan governor so kindly put young COVID patients in nursing home. One young man beat an elderly guy using him as a punching bag, all caught on video. So Cuomo is not the only idiot governor out there. I definitely didn't say that, right? There's a lot more idiot governors out there than just Cuomo. This is not an isolated incident. Thank you, Just XUXA. We got Want to Know says, don't forget Cuomo, bro, beating up Florida and Trump every night trying to quarantine Florida. Yeah, I mean, DeSantis was out there. He had the beaches open, and they were coming down on him every day. This guy's a maniac, right? He's out there literally killing people. For what? Having people out in the open sunlight at a beach that is large enough with very active air and the sun and ultraviolet rays coming down from the sun, just disinfecting everything in sight. He's getting skewered for that day after day after day. Even here in Arizona, Doug Ducey, he's been just getting skewered over this stuff. He's literally killing people. Remember people on Twitter were out there going, every day, Donald Trump's golfing again. There are literally like 747s of dead people falling out of the skies from COVID, and Trump's golfing, and Trump's doing this, and Trump's doing that. Well, Cuomo was literally sending sick people back into nursing homes, and it was his order that was directly resulted in probably literally thousands of deaths. And so, one side got skewered, the other side got a Grammy or an Emmy or whatever he got. We got Liberty or Death, who said, you said assemblyman. That's gendered language. I impeach you. I deserve to be impeached for that. First of all, it's 2021. Okay. I can't assume his gender. That is extremely biased of me. And it's probably my teeming white privilege just emanating out of my pores. I deserve to be impeached. Thank you for holding me accountable there. Liberty or death. We got Nadar Blasier says the governor of Michigan apparently did the same. Stephen Crowder has been requesting Freedom of Information Act requests and is holding a protest against her refusal to release all of the info. All right, so yeah, we've got some confirmations that Whitmer is doing the same thing. Want to Know says the big problem is on the Revolution on Fox trying to prove Fauci and his partner paid the Wuhan lab genetically modify from bat to human because Obama signed a law, couldn't do it in the U.S., and then got out. And yeah, I think that is sort of in alignment with that concept of, what do they call it? Sort of an incremental evolution of the virus. I know there's a specific term for it, but in other words, what they're doing is they're trying to accelerate the evolution of certain viruses. So they will sort of make copies of a copy 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 of the virus, because that sort of models evolution, the reproduction of it. And they're trying to take a benign virus and see how it evolves into a deadly virus. And they're actually doing this research around the world. And one of the allegations was that they were doing that in Wuhan, and it got out, and that's what started this whole debacle. We got another one from Get Some Skate says, why are politicians dictating what happens in healthcare at all? As a nurse, I've repeatedly found this to be absurd. From politicians to insurance companies, who knows better about how to handle a healthcare crisis than healthcare workers? It's a great point. Yeah, I don't know, right? And I also don't know why you're not allowed to talk about a lot of this stuff. Okay, all of these big tech companies now are saying you can't, if you're a doctor on YouTube. I mean, I've heard of doctors getting banned and removed from YouTube from talking about alternative medicine. And you think, well, they're kind of more qualified than some moderators somewhere on some platform. So why are we not listening to them, or at least getting their opinion? All right, our last one on this segment is Want to Know says, what about kids committing suicide, hungry, and child abuse? Lost education restaurants closed. There's the next big death rates. Yeah, so suicides are up, and child abuse is up. Alcoholism is up. Domestic violence is up. It's not good. And, it's been a year now, folks, right? The original national emergency was declared March, I think, 13th of 2020. We're coming up on a year of this stuff. Supposed to be 15 days to slow the spread, then just a couple more extensions here and there. Fast forward, it's been a year. And I know a lot of kids have not been in school. A lot of people have been petrified to even leave their homes. They've been locked down. And it's not good for the mental health of this country. And I think I was commenting over on Scott Alexander's blog where he was talking about the long-term effects of some of this stuff, that there was a whole generation of people who came out of being kids during the World War II era. And they did things a certain way because of that experience, because of rationing, because of the way that society was structured for that short period of time in our history, that they just sort of assimilated that into their lifestyle. And that's how they are living 30 years from now. And so the question is, well, we've had a bunch of kids who know that you're not supposed to have any human contact, no hugs, no high fives, no handshakes. You're not even supposed to be in the same room with them. And so now they've been living that way, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, 4-year-old kids for a year now, and it's not letting up anytime soon. What is that going to lead to down the road? Are they going to have a permanent impact from this type of situation? And I think the answer is probably yes. I don't have any kids, but I would guess that the answer is yes on that. So those questions came over from locals.com/watching the watchers. If you want to be a part of the Q&A, you can go on over there, support the show, and ask your questions. All right, so let's turn to our next story. Quick story here. This is from Breitbart.com. Again, a Christian pastor jailed for holding church services in Canada. And I thought this was only going on here in the States, but no, apparently our Canadian friends up north are having the same troubles. People want to go and exercise their religion. They want to be a part of a spirituality that gives them some sense of comfort in their lives, especially in a time like this where it's very tumultuous. And apparently in Canada, just like in other parts of the country here, not allowed to do that. This was an interesting story. Reverend James Coates of Grace Life Church of Edmonton turned himself into the police on Tuesday, 2 days after officials attended Sunday service to assess compliance with conditions issued to the pastor. Police said in a news release on Wednesday. Authorities from the Alberta Health Services and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police determined that Pastor Coates, quote, was not complying with his undertaking release conditions issued by the authorities. Grace Life has held worship services for 3 consecutive weeks after it was ordered to close at the end of January because of restrictions related to the coronavirus. The officers told Coates that he could be released if he promised to discontinue Sunday services, which the pastor refused to do. Good for him. Coates' lawyer, and this is not legal advice. I'm not advising him to break the law, but sometimes something like that feels pretty good. Coates' lawyer, James Kitchen, told CTV News that his client was willing to go to jail in order to, quote, do the right thing, but Coates could not, in good conscience, agree to the cessation of church services. His first obedience is to the Lord, is to his God, and normally obeying Jesus and obeying the government go right in hand, Kitchen said. The government's forcing him into a position where he has to choose between disobeying God and obeying the government, or obeying God and disobeying the government. And we know which side of the coin he is on that one. Coates has been charged with 2 counts of contravention of the Public Health Act. And I don't do criminal law in Canada, of course, but that sounds like a somewhat hefty charge for failing to comply with a condition of his release. A spokesman for the Mounties said that the pastor has been given a second court appearance for next Wednesday. In a statement, Grace Life laid out its position on the government lockdowns and their effectiveness. It says here, we do not see our actions as perpetuating the longevity of COVID-19 or any other virus that will inevitably come along. If anything, we see our actions as contributing to its end, the end of destructive lockdowns and the end of the attempt to institutionalize the debilitating fear of viral infections. Preach, my friend. Our local church is clear evidence that government lockdowns are unnecessary, the statement added. In fact, it is also evidence of how harmful they are. Right? And we've seen a lot of this, and I have a lot of empathy for this argument and for this position. The general response, in my opinion, has been largely from governments. They want some action. They want to be seen as doing something. That's why they just do things even though they haven't really thought it through, or they put people back in nursing homes. They say, well, you're in the hospital, you're sick, we're going to throw you in a nursing home. Why? Well, we got to do something with you. So that sounds as good as anything. Maybe they're set up for it, whatever, and they just make a decision. Sort of the same thing, in my opinion, with a lot of the masking. Okay, well, not much we can do here. We got a lockdown. We don't have a vaccine for a long period of time. People, what can we do? I don't know. How about a mask? Sure. Put masks on. Is that going to cure anything or solve the situation? No, of course. We've been wearing masks for a year. Still going on. Hasn't solved anything. Arguably has reduced the spread, has reduced the number of casualties. I don't know. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. Don't want to speculate on that, but it's action. And when the government comes in and they say, well, we don't know what else to do on this thing. Somebody in a conference room says, well, how about 2 masks? Just put on a second mask. Yeah, that's a great idea, Jim. All right, give everybody a second mask. All right, perfect. So we're going to go out there. Dr. Fauci goes out there, double mask up. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's not a real solution. It's just something that they want to do. Sort of like when you get on an airplane, you put a seatbelt on. All right. Now, if you crash into the ocean from 30,000 feet, seatbelt's not going to do much for you. But it's action, right? It feels good. And so I know there are other reasons why you wear a seatbelt on an airplane, but you get my drift, right? It's sort of security theater at the airport, just like it is viral prevention theater out here in the real world. And I have not seen any real strong evidence that going to church with a group of other people is going to get you sick if they don't exercise the proper precautions. What if they did social distancing? What if they did masking? What if they held services outside on Sunday? What if they just accommodated? Would that be okay or no? Or is it just action for the sake of action? It's lockdowns for the sake of lockdowns. And this guy just said, all right, enough of that already, right? I'm sick of the debilitating fear of viral infections. I'm sick of not being able to worship my Lord and God. And he's taking a stand for it. So hats off to him. This is what the guy looks like. It says Grace Life pastor James Coates remains in custody. This was published yesterday. Grace Life Church update number 2. James Coates remains in custody following the charges, a bail hearing in front of a justice and a court appearance in front of a judge this morning. February 14th, Valentine's Day, the police attended the Grace Life Church to assess compliance. Observations were made that Coates was not complying with his undertaking release conditions, and the church was not in compliance. James Coates turned himself in, charged with 2 counts. Following a bail hearing, Justice Coates was to be released. So the judge was going to let him go, but he remained in custody overnight after refusing to agree to those conditions. Then this morning, he still continued to refuse to agree with those conditions, and a judge's order was issued compelling him to attend court on Wednesday, February 24th. So that'll be next week. Quote here, we've been consistent in our approach of escalated levels of enforcement with Pastor Coates. We were hopeful to resolve this issue in a different manner, said Inspector Mike Loken. The pastor's action and the subsequent effects those actions could have on health and safety of citizens dictated our response in this situation. So, so the poor police, they're just out there doing their jobs. They're just trying to enforce the situation. They asked him a number of times, hey, you got to close your church. He said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I don't know much about Canadian law. I don't know if they have a Bill of Rights or a free exercise clause or anything like that. But, we certainly do here in the United States. And still, they're trying to shut churches down, and they're being successful at that. We have Jeremy Matrita says, weren't there a lot of pastors arrested for holding church last year? I think there were in the U.S. I don't recall. We weren't doing the show when this all started. I think we just started doing the show, and so I really wasn't diving into a lot of these issues back then. I was trying to make sure we didn't lose our business in the light of lockdowns. And so the show sort of came about in the latter part of last year. And so I wasn't just really focused on it, but I would guess that there were, right? I would guess that there would be a lot of people who were trying to do this stuff. I know the gym owners, I think there's a gym owner around the country who's accruing like $1 million in debt for the penalties for staying open. And so the same types of issues have certainly been happening here. Another question over from locals.com says, Jeremy Matrita says, new mask guideline from Fauci. There you go. Let's see how many this is. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, 6, 7. It's like 20 masks there. So I think that's probably the answer. 20 masks. Actually, you should probably just wrap your head in bubble wrap and cellophane. Wrap your whole body in bubble wrap, because it's a dangerous world out there. We don't want you stubbing your toe or bumping into anything. Mask up, bubble wrap up, cellophane everything up, and maybe you'll survive the COVID nightmare. We've got another one from Cattle Kiver over on Local. Says, this is terrible. Our schools and churches closed for about 2.5 months in late March, April, and May. Thankful that our church has been open since, and our schools have been open since August. A good reason to live in rural Nebraska. Now, if we can remove this virtue signaling of people wanting to require a mask, we are in the level green. So what am I looking at here? We've got, looks like Nebraska COVID rates. So they were locked down for about 2.5 months in March, April, and May. Right. So presumably that was about this time. Then afterwards, it spiked and came back down. So that looks like it's the COVID rates. Every day, new cases reported since the previous day, updated 1 day ago from the New York Times. So, yeah, I mean, and this was another huge issue, just an obvious, I thought, oversight that was kind of clear in retrospect. I didn't recognize this when we first went into a lockdown. And remember when that happened, there were hot spots around the country. And I forget where the original hotspot was, but I think it was in New York. And we saw a lot of this stuff bubbling up. And so the whole nation just responded uniformly like we were all New York City. And that really wasn't the situation, right? It was sort of that each individual city was sort of like these little explosions of COVID. And so why were we locking down in Arizona when we had virtually no cases during that original national emergency time? What the hell were we doing that for? We should have locked down, in my opinion, when we started to see some more activity, because by the time that our lockdown was over and we had no cases, people were over the lockdowns, right? When Arizona started to get bad, we had already burned our one lockdown. Because people say, well, we already did that. You already told us it was going to happen one time. And every time we have more lockdowns and more extensions, people just get more and more sick of it. So then Arizona just recently went through another very bad spike, and no lockdowns, none of that, right? Because the people just wouldn't have had it. And to treat the entire country as one giant uniform entity didn't make much sense. It would have been, I think, more appropriate to be more responsive to where these little outbursts of COVID were taking place. And, and then yes. So like in this situation, maybe the lockdowns in Nebraska should have happened here, right? August, September, October, in order to stop this spread. Why were they locked down March, April, and May, which was back over here when there were virtually no cases? And so it wasn't about sort of responding to the science or acting on the data. It was about being in comportment with what everybody else was doing. All the governors are shutting down. We got to shut down too. And then everybody in politics, at least this was my experience here in Arizona, they were saying, well, we have to lock down. And the question was, well, why? Well, because of COVID. I know, but there's no cases here. But we have to lock down. You're negligent if you don't lock down. And so everybody just got in lockstep. They locked down. I think in retrospect, it was not the best way to handle the whole situation. Ma Fox says, nope, no Bill of Rights here. Sorry, Ma. We have one here, but the courts just kind of just ignore it for COVID. The Bill of Rights is for everything except COVID, apparently. Another one from Jeremy says, Biden COVID advisor can't explain why closed California isn't doing better than open Florida. Another good story from yesterday. And then we've got that here. Biden COVID advisor can't explain why closed California isn't doing better than open Florida. Published 24 hours ago. Miss Faith clipped this on the fly. Isn't she outstanding, folks? White House COVID-19 advisor Andy Slavitt appeared stumped on Wednesday when asked on NBC to explain why California and Florida, there's similar COVID-19 trends despite having wildly different responses to the pandemic. Slavitt said the virus is still very unpredictable and a little bit beyond our explanation. No kidding. That's what we've all been saying for a year now. So why are you playing this theater with us? Why are you telling us you know how all this is going to work and we got to do X, Y, and Z, shut everything down, don't go to church, don't send our kids to school, don't do any of this stuff if it's a little bit beyond our explanation? We know that. All right, we've got this. He says, what do we know? What we do know is that the more careful people are, the more they mask and social distance, the quicker we vaccinate, the quicker it goes away, and the less it spreads. Noting that the variants make it harder to predict. As we have all learned, this is a virus that continues to surprise us. It's very hard to predict. And all around the country, we've got to continue to do a better job. I think we are, but we're not done yet. But we're done yet. I think we are, but we're done yet. I think there should be a not there. All right. California has emerged as one of the strictest states in the nation. Governor Gavin Newsom shutting down businesses and schools. Administration said it was implementing these measures based on ICU capacity. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis, out of Florida, a Republican, has taken an entirely different approach. Though he took similar measures to Newsom early on, he eventually lifted statewide restrictions on the economy and prohibited law enforcement from fining people. So 2 different ways to handle it. My opinion, one is the right way. One is absolutely the wrong way. All right. So we've got another question that is loading up right here from Jack Alaya from Miss Faith. Let's see what's going on here. There it is. All right. So she says, Jack Alaya says, remember, schools and churches are primary voting locations. If you want to force mail-in voting, closing schools and churches increases your justification as massive numbers of districts cease to have any place to vote. There that question is. I was reading it without it being on the screen. There's the question from Jack Alaya. Interesting observation. Isn't that right? Isn't that interesting? Got to have that mail-in voting if you close down the schools and the churches. All right. Next story. So speaking of COVID, there is an individual, according to theguardian.com, who was wanted, a man on the run, and he was hiding in lockdown with his family. He might have had a warrant out for his arrest. This is coming from West Sussex, so I'm not sure what they call that there, but he was wanted. They wanted to apprehend him and put him in custody, and he was in hiding, and they couldn't find him until he got so stinking sick of the lockdowns that he just went and turned himself in. Here's what the story says. Wanted man quits lockdown at home for, quote, peace and quiet in prison. Wouldn't that be nice? A wanted man handed himself into the police in West Sussex to avoid having to spend any more time in lockdown with the people he lives with. The man, whose identity was not disclosed, presented himself voluntarily to the Sussex police on Wednesday afternoon, reportedly in the hopes of getting some peace and quiet. Police said the man, who was wanted on a recall to prison, handed himself into the Burgess police station and was in custody and heading back to jail. Psychologists are reporting a rise in the number of people experiencing symptoms of sustained stress, similar to burnout at work, including problems with sleep and concentration, and many people are desperate for human contact after months of relative or total isolation. So this guy just says, I'll just go to prison. Things will be better there than they are in free society. A wide range of studies have found that the pandemic has taken a toll on relationships with family and friends. Research from the University of Oxford found that levels of stress, depression, and anxiety among parents and carers? Parents and carers, well, I haven't seen that word in that context. So like people who care for people, had increased with the pressures of the lockdowns. Couples have also felt the strain. In April last year, almost a quarter of couples, 23%, say they were struggling with their relationships, according to research by a relationship support charity called Relate. Figures were released in July to show lockdown had 8% of people realize they need to end their relationship, rising to 15% for those aged between 25 and 34. Divorce inquiries also soared by 300% last year as the coronavirus lockdown led to many to consider their relationships, according to the co-op. And lawyers were inundated with inquiries from divorced parents arguing about where their children should stay during lockdown, with some seeking a prison sentence for their former partners for breaking custody arrangements. It's a whole new field of law. There are like COVID crimes now, mass crimes. You see people assaulting each other in grocery stores and parking lots and restaurants for mask issues. It's creating a whole new series of different areas of law that people can practice in. Now you've got COVID divorces, you've got COVID custody battles. Of course, you've got COVID estate plans and COVID deaths and COVID probate situations. You've got COVID crimes. You've got the whole thing. It's a boon for the lawyers. Some of them, not all of them. So the ramifications, I think, are just compounding. And at some point, the bill is going to become due. And we're going to see what the response looks like for these elected people who have been depressing, causing anxiety, wrecking businesses, wrecking marriages, wrecking relationships with children, wrecking student education all over the world. That bill is going to become due, and we don't know what that is going to look like yet. Into the questions over from locals.com. We've got Liberty or Death says, as you know, the Kung flu is a very woke virus. Doesn't kill people after 6 p.m., won't kill you if you are actively eating or drinking, and will attack you if you believe in liberty. Yeah, it's conniving. This little virus is just like, hey, I'm going to get you unless you're eating or drinking, or if it's after 6 p.m. nonsense. We got Cattle Caregiver says, peace and quiet from his family in prison. I thought I had a rough childhood. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think the story is like a little bit facetious, right? That guy obviously needed to go back to prison. He was wanted. And so he probably got a little bit tired of being on the run and just said, I'm going to go deal with the circumstances. But it is kind of funny to say, well, I need some peace and quiet. I'm going to go back to prison. So the guy at least has a sense of humor about the whole thing. We got Jack Elia, who says, if a person is divorcing you over COVID, you are better off. Oh, my God. Yeah, I know. Well, what if the terms of your marriage was that, honey, we're going to leave the house for, 8 to 10 hours a day. I'm not going to see you all day. Right? That's an original term of the marriage. Right? If you're going to, I'm not married, haven't been married. Don't necessarily intend to get married anytime soon. but if I was, then I think my question would be, am I going to get a little alone time away from you? Like a lot of alone time. Okay. I love you, sweetie. Love you, baby. I intend to stay married with you for eternity and into the afterlife and all of that stuff. But if I got to spend 12 months locked in a house with you, I'm pulling the ejection cord. I'm out. Doesn't matter who she is. All right, so let's change gears a little bit yet again. Next story is about George Floyd. And of course, the officer who murdered him, his name is Derek Chauvin. He is coming up for trial. Now, I was a little bit skeptical that this trial was going to take place so soon. I actually am still a little bit skeptical, but I am thinking that they're really trying to do their best to accelerate the trial to make sure that this happens because of the outstanding issues. There's a lot of people out there who are still up in arms about it, rightfully so, saying that there needs to be accountability and justice delayed is justice denied. This guy had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think the official total was, and he's dead. And so if he's sitting in custody without being adjudicated, without being sentenced, that is leaving some open concerns from, of course, George's family and the people who are in sort of behind the movement on criminal justice reform. And so it's a little bit surprising to me that the trial is still scheduled for March 8th, which is in about 3 weeks. I thought for sure they would do their best to try to extend this out as far as they can, just because it's a complicated case, right? There were 4 officers involved, a number of witnesses. George Floyd has had, I think, 2 autopsies at this point in time. And there's some pretty hard science that's going to come into this about what was ultimately in his blood and in his system and what the ultimate cause of death was, whether it was an overdose from fentanyl or whether this was something that was caused by the knee on the neck. And it wasn't just Chauvin's knee. There were 3 other officers who were also laying on him on the side of the road. So, there's a lot of causation, a lot of expert witnesses, expert testimony, complicated trial. This is a national trial, a lot of people involved, a lot of different lawyers. And typically these types of homicide cases will take years, sometimes 2 years. We covered another story. The shooter, we just talked about this last week. The shooter in Parkland, that happened in 2018. He shot, I think, 17 people, killed 17 people. That case is still not going to trial. That was from 2018. It's been 3 years. And so George Floyd, this just happened back in the middle of 2020, and now he's scheduled for trial already. So that is a very quick trial in my experience. We're seeing this elsewhere around the country. These trials just don't go that fast. But out of this jurisdiction in Minneapolis, they are moving full steam ahead. And since the trial is gearing up about 3 weeks from now, they are really having to think about security. They don't want anything that happened on Capitol Hill. They don't want any more riots. And so this story came over from CBS local affiliate in Minnesota. It says that city leaders in Minneapolis announced on Wednesday the outlines of a public safety plan for the upcoming trial of Derek Chauvin, the former city police officer accused of killing George Floyd. In a statement, the city says that the crews have already begun installing security perimeters around the Hennepin County Government Center, City Hall, and other nearby buildings. Additionally, the Minnesota National Guard has been activated to provide assistance for the duration of the Chauvin trial, which will begin jury selection during the week of March 8th. At a morning press conference, Mayor Jacob Frey said that law enforcement presence will be increasing throughout the trial. At the time the verdict is read, up to 2,000 National Guard members could be on duty alongside 1,100 law enforcement officers from 11 different jurisdictions. So that's a big presence, right? I mean, I think we had, 25,000 over National Guard over in D.C., So this is sort of an order of magnitude smaller than that, but it's a smaller jurisdiction, and they are loading up. They've got 1,100 law enforcement officials coming from 11 different jurisdictions. So 100 different officers from each different jurisdiction all pouring in, and they're going to be gearing up for this thing. And we don't have an idea on what the trial is looking like in terms of length, but it could be a month, right? This could be a very long trial depending on the type of pace that the judge sets. I want to go through and give you a quick update on it. It's looking like right here, the trial is still scheduled. So I took this screenshot earlier today, and the trial in this case is scheduled for Monday, March 8th, 2021 at the Hennepin County Government Center. An update for the media. Instructions for the media, you can reserve a seat. It's going to be posted here. General public, instructions for the members of the public who are interested in attending the trial will be posted here when they are determined. And so you can see these related cases. These are the other 3 officers who have also been charged, and it's moving forward. It's still on the schedule. I mean, they're telling the media, reserve your seats. Telling the general public, we're going to tell you how to get in here when the time is ready. And so it looks like beginning on March 1st, 6th Street in Minneapolis will be closed between 3rd and 4th. I've been to Minneapolis. Yeah, I went to Minneapolis like when I was in college, I think. And it was one of the most difficult cities that I've ever been to navigate. It's like very confusing. And this was before, Google Maps and Apple Maps and all that stuff. But it was a complicated city to navigate around. And I'm not bad with a map. But, Minneapolis, 6th Street, I don't know what that is, but they're locking it all down. They're closing it down. There will be a unified command center similar to the one that was in charge of security during the Super Bowl. When it comes to public safety and when it comes to the need for assistance, Minnesota comes together, said the police chief. Frey says the site of Floyd's death at 38th in Chicago will also be closed to traffic, but is expected to be the site of the protest. They will want to express their First Amendment rights, and we want to enable them to do so safely. He dismissed the political battles at the Capitol over paying for security, saying that traditional mutual aid arrangements will play out. Politics really has no place here. He mentioned there will be a significant road and skyway closures during the trial. There will even be a rapid response team to address rumors online and in person. The city says that it is developing guidance for business and property owners on how to take precautions while remaining open for business during the trial. Likewise, the city's Office of Violence Prevention will be working with neighborhoods and other groups to be prepared. John Harrington, commissioner of the DPS, the Department of Public Safety, says they are committed to protecting the rights of citizens. You're going to see uniforms of all different colors. You're going to see squad cars from all different kinds of places coming together here to say with one voice that we support the First Amendment. We are going to protect the Twin Cities, which is great, right? I mean, people have a right to go out and protest. In Arizona, we were arresting protesters for some stupid reason. A lot of those charges got dismissed later after defense attorneys and the media got involved, but it sounds like here they're making a very strong effort to ensure that people can go out and voice their opinions, which is a good thing. Now, the next question will be, well, what will happen? If it starts to get a little unruly, are they going to round up people? Are they going to start, pepper spraying people, shooting people with, rubber bullets and all of that stuff? Probably. We'll see. Hopefully not, but probably. Leaders, including the Hennepin County Sheriff David Hutchinson, emphasize that there's a line and crossing it will have consequences. If you cause harm, if you break things, burn things, hurt people's livelihood, I'm here to say you will go to jail. Harrington says about 300 officers from around the state have volunteered so far to help with trial security. He hopes more will step up in the coming weeks. State and local authorities are saying privately they are expecting criticism that their security preparations are excessive. They say they can handle that. They are still dealing with the aftermath of what happened last year and the ongoing criticism that they were not prepared and their response was not strong enough. And this was the same situation, Minneapolis, right? That's where we talked about them. They wanted to originally defund the police. The city council removed $8 million from their budget, and then they gave them $6.4 million back with really little modifications to the performance, to the execution of the duties that the police perform. I think basically the only real concession that they got from the police was that we're going to ask some more questions during our hiring procedures. Basically, we're going to add a checkbox into your application. You can check the box if you are a maniac, and then we won't hire you. So that's good. So they got the $6.4 million back, and they're going to be beefing up security, which is a good thing, right? We do not want no violence, no destruction, no burnings of buildings down. It's bad on Capitol Hill. It's bad during the summer of unrest. I guess the question will be, is Kamala Harris going to help bail out anybody who gets arrested like she did last time? All right, so this was from the court documents. These were submitted today, filed in the district court, the state of Minnesota, 218, as you can see, filed this morning, 10:49 a.m. 4th Judicial District. We've got State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. And so I was telling you a little bit about supplemental prosecution disclosure. Okay, disclosure is the government's files, right? They've got evidence. They're the ones who have the evidence. They know what they're going to be presenting. And so when you're in a criminal case and you're an accused, you're a defendant, you want to know what the allegations against you are. You have a right to cross-examine the evidence. You have a right to confront your accusers. You have a right to understand the nature of the offense and the nature of the allegations that are being promulgated against you. And so what we're talking about here is the government is giving the defense more information and they're notifying of them of that. So let's take a look at what they're sending over to the defense right now. It says here, pursuant to Rule 901, these are local rules of criminal procedure, supplemental disclosure containing pages 43010 to 44045. Okay, so about 1,000 pages of stuff is being sent over there. And now, of course, I'm not working on this case, but if there are 44,000 pages of documents, that's a lot of documents, which is why I'm saying this is kind of a surprise that this case is scheduled for trial in 3 weeks, and it looks like they're setting it up to literally go, to actually happen. So what are they disclosing? We have more police investigative reports, so this might be, another 1,000 pages, including more police reports. We've also got some evidence receipts, so stuff that they've confiscated or they have it in evidence. We've also got some photographs and some videotapes and or DVDs. We don't know. And then we also have, it looks like, some other documents. So we've got turning point records. We have additional items provided for medical expert review. We have NMS laboratory litigation packet, BCA lab notes. We've got a crime scene processing final checklist. We have an evidence log, laboratory analysis request. We have evidence of chain of custody reports and a memo to the file regarding the Dr. Carter meeting. So it sounds like this is a lot of the forensic evidence about sort of the lab results. What was in George Floyd's blood? What was the ultimate cause of death? We've got evidence of a chain of custody, or a chain of custody report about the evidence. So a chain of custody document is just sort of confirming that somebody did something and gave it to somebody else, and it's documenting that transition. So the way I explain it typically here is if you've got, let's say, a blood results or a vial of blood, you have Officer A who draws the vial, gives it to Officer B to take that vial and impound it into evidence. Officer B does that. It goes into evidence. So now you have a record. You've got a chain of custody. It went from A to B into evidence. Then when Officer C or the lab technician withdraws the vial from evidence, you go from the evidence locker to Officer C who gives it to the lab technician, Officer D, and you just have a record of that. Because what you want to identify is where there are gaps in that chain. Right? If suddenly something happens and Officer B is fired, resigns, is killed tragically, just doesn't want to testify, something can happen. Well, now you have a blood vial that has been tested, but you don't have a chain there because B is missing. It went from A to C. Well, B could have damaged the evidence, could have jeopardized it, could have tainted the blood in one way or another. And because you can't testify, you can't find that person to bring them in to testify. That really undermines the state's case. So they have all of this stuff is now being disclosed over to the defense team. You can see the state attorney general is the person who is promulgating these disclosure is signed off by Matthew Frank, who is the assistant attorney general for Minnesota. And so those are the documents that were just published today. So presumably the defense is going to review that, and then we'll see where it goes. All right, so let's go over to the locals.com questions that we're taking here. We've got Jeremy Matrita says, whether he is guilty or not, seems like it will be difficult to get a fair trial due to the riots and overall publicity this case has had. Yeah. And, this is a really tricky case for the prosecutors here, because if they don't get a intentional, are they charging him with intentional murder? I'm going to have to refresh myself on the charges. Of course, we're going to cover the hell out of this case. We're going to dive into it deeply because I think it's going to be very instructive. We're going to be able to learn a lot from what is happening in the trial. I'm not sure what the publication rules are, whether they're going to be live streaming any of this or whether we're going to sort of be deciphering it after the conclusions of the day. But yes, if it's not sort of a clean sweep, if he's not convicted on all counts, I'm not sure what you're going to get in terms of a response from the public. If they split this down the middle and say, no, it wasn't intentional murder, intentional homicide. It was instead, negligent manslaughter. he's still going to prison, but it's not the original murder charge or something resembling a murder charge. I don't think they charged him with intentional murder. I think it was sort of a second degree-ish murder charge, if I can recall correctly. But the point is, right, unless it's a clean sweep, I'm not sure, even if it is a clean sweep, I'm not sure that you're going to have people that are happy with this any way it goes. And so that's why they're prepping for it. I don't think you can read anything into the preparation. My initial thought was, wow, they're really concerned here. Maybe they know that their case is weak. Maybe the prosecutors know, like, the evidence here is not so good. We were going to make this fentanyl, or we were going to say that he murdered him, but this fentanyl report came back. It's looking like he was like at 10 times the limit. And, maybe they know something that we just don't know. Of course, they know a lot that we don't know, but you could try to read into the beefing up of security and say, well, maybe they're trying to telegraph something. That this is in fact a weak case, and they're just prepping for a not guilty verdict, and that's why we see such a huge show of force coming in. Jack Elias says, do we really think that at this point, as much as the George Floyd case has been politicized, that any resulting adjudication will lower the public temperature? No, actually, Jack Elias. And you were one step ahead of me. I literally just said that. I'm not sure that anything is going to satisfy people. He could be guilty on all counts. And when we were originally covering this, I think people were already upset that he wasn't charged with intentional murder. And I don't think that charge was justified, actually. Did he wake up intending to go and kill George Floyd or kill a man? I didn't see that in evidence, but once he was in the middle of the altercation with him, yeah, at that point, I would say he got intent to violate the protocols. And that is we read through the Minnesota statutes, and I can't recall them off the top of my head. It's been a long time. It's been, coming up on a year, but there was some distinction between the two, that it was still sort of a reckless, intentional murder, but it wasn't the same as, waking up and saying, well, my cheating wife has been cheating on me for 3 years, so I'm going to go track her down at work and kill her, right? That was sort of the high level murder charge. And I just didn't see that, right? Obviously, Derek Chauvin didn't wake up and go and try to kill George Floyd. Now, there was some sort of a contradictory evidence there saying that maybe that Chauvin actually knew George Floyd from prior altercations, prior incidents, and maybe they could make that higher level murder charge stick. And so, you could see here a situation where there's a clean sweep, he's convicted on all counts, and people are still saying, well, the DA's office didn't charge him with the appropriate murder charge, therefore we're angry, we're going to burn the city down. That could be possible. We got Ma Fox in the house, says, yes, they murdered him. I know the YouTube chat isn't going to like that one, Robert, but it's the truth. The idea that assisting in killing another individual doesn't mean you aided in their death is ridiculous. Sorry, folks. Police have a duty to make sure those in their custody have access to immediate medical treatment when necessary. To not provide prompt medical assessment and treatment is negligence per se, in my opinion. And so, I think that's largely my same opinion on this. The police they have protocols, they've got proper procedures, and they were outside of that, right? A knee on the neck for 9 minutes when people are literally shouting at you, hey, you're killing him, he's not moving anymore, what are you doing? Is so grotesque behavior that you can't endorse that, right? And I know that on this issue, I'm sort of out of alignment with a lot of the audience of this channel. Many of you, right? Many of you are in favor of, supporting the police, and the police do no wrong, and everything is excusable to a certain degree. And I shouldn't be generalizing that, but I know that there is that opinion out there. And I agree. I try to give the police the benefit of the doubt when they deserve it. But in a situation like this, I just don't think he deserves it. And it was something where there was a documented history of him sort of breaking protocol. And what we saw on that tape, it was so gruesome, and it was so inhumane to watch him just sort of ignore what was going on literally right under his knee, that I just can't imagine that a jury doesn't convict him of something. But we'll see where that goes. I do think that it's probably not going to resolve much of anything in this country. I think regardless of what the outcome is, it's still, the temperature in the room is still going to be high. I'm just hopeful that it doesn't lead to more damage, more destruction, more death, more violence. I don't like the idea that it's becoming more adversarial with the police. And I know I have a role to play in that, right? I come on this show and I am pretty hard on the police a lot, but it's part of what we do. I'm a defense attorney, and I think that that's necessary to balance the scales of justice. We have enough people out there puffing up the police every which way. They're heroes and they save us, and nobody knows what they go through every day. Every day is a death sentence potentially for them, and I get all of that. But they need to be held accountable. But burning cities down and, defunding the police, I think it's just making the division bigger. It's making the division stronger. And if you have a situation where that, the temperature continues to rise on both sides of the aisle, we may have a bigger clash at the next one, right? The next George Floyd situation may result in more death or may result in, an actual warlike conditions. And I want to make sure that does not happen. So I am grateful that they're going to have a lot of security there. And hopefully this thing goes smoothly, because there does need to be accountability. There does need to be due process, right? I'm a criminal defense attorney. Okay. So from Chauvin's perspective, he's innocent at this time. He's in custody, but he is innocent until he's proven guilty otherwise. And I expect his defense attorneys to put on a hell of a case. And I'm excited to follow along and see what they come up with. But, there are some pretty good arguments there as well, right? If George Floyd really did have a fentanyl limit or a fentanyl in his bloodstream that is extremely high, I think the prosecutor's office is going to have a difficult time making the case that Chauvin's knee was the but-for cause of death. In other words, would Floyd have died anyways because of the levels of drugs in his body? And I haven't seen, we saw, I think a cover sheet, the first page document of George Floyd's autopsy report. But that's kind of it. There's a lot more out there, and it's all going to come to light soon. They're going to present all of this evidence in court. Hopefully we can be a part of it, but we're going to learn a lot from it. And I just want to make sure that we're trying to squeeze some value out of this. We're trying to learn more about how we can improve our justice system. We can learn more about how we can support the police, how we can eliminate some of the racial bias that's going on in there, how we can build a bridge with the underserved communities that exist in the country, just to sort of move the ball forward, make things better by analyzing where things went wrong so that we can fix some of the problems. That's really my only objective, right? I don't have a political stake in this particular case, other than to say that I think that the police are very callous, and there's a culture there that they just sort of overlook a lot of this stuff. And this one was so egregious that this cannot be swept under the rug. So I'm glad that we're, as a society, talking through this. I made this point last year. The whole country was on board talking about criminal justice reform. Very excited about it. Everybody was saying, okay, look, finally, we've seen enough. We're sick of this. And we were all unified. 90% of the country was, after what we saw happen to George Floyd. Then suddenly, there was a reaction to the death, and they started burning buildings down, torching precincts, wanting to defund the police, and the pendulum swung the entire other way, which was a major missed opportunity, because I think finally we could have had a real serious discussion about this stuff, and I think we lost that because of the destruction and mayhem that resulted. And it's really unfortunate, and I'm hopeful that does not happen again when this trial takes place, because it's going to set the justice reform movement back 20 years. In my opinion. And we're finally at the cusp where we can maybe see some real changes in this place. Stuff that is not just, one-sided, stuff that's better for the officers, stuff that's better for the citizens of this country. And we can all move forward in a little bit more productive manner. I'm hopeful for that. We have Paula MK says, as a first responder, a paramedic, I can say that we are indoctrinated to automatically back other first responders like police officers. We are supposed to give officers the benefit of the doubt, even when something appears to be an egregious offense. Your channel has started to give me a new perspective on the criminal justice system, and I just wanted to thank you for that. Well, thank you, Paula MK, and I appreciate that. And we appreciate you for being a first responder, a paramedic. You're out there saving lives and helping society, so thank you for that. And, we've noticed this. Remember, I think we were talking about this in the Daniel Prude case. Daniel Prude was the other one out of Rochester. I could be mistaken. We covered a lot of these last year. But I think Daniel Prude, what happened, they actually basically murdered that guy on the side of the road. One officer was doing a plank on his neck, collapsed everything in his head. He died like 7 days later. And we were going through the body cam on that. And one of the first responders showed up after he was, incapacitated on the ground. There were like 6 or 7 guys laying on top of him. He was basically dying. And he was not a threat to anybody. He was in handcuffs. He was totally naked, had no weapons, firearms, not a threat at all. And the first responder shows up and says, and we played it like several times, shows up and the cop says, yeah, well, I don't know what happened. He's kind of dying there. And the first responder says, man, you guys have it really tough out there. You guys are just doing your best. You got to stay safe. I'm going, what are you even talking about? You just showed up. You don't even know what happened here. But that's your default answer. Maybe an appropriate question would be, well, what the hell happened to him? What did you guys do? Why is he laying there naked in handcuffs dying? You want to give me some explanation on that? Because I got to go save this guy's life. Instead, it was like, well, just kind of leave him there. Hey, good job, guys. Way to protect yourselves. And I'm thinking that's just very troubling. Jack Elias says, I wonder if Ellis is setting up the trial up to fail so it can lead to more social instability and rioting. I'll tell you this, folks. You don't want to read into or sort of mind read some of these other people and try to predict what they're doing. But we had a case here in Arizona where, if I had to guess, I would say that the prosecutors had no real desire to convict the former officer. The name is escaping me right now. I'm sort of embarrassed about it because it happened here. I forget the guy's name. It was a police shooting. There was a man in a hotel who was on his hands and knees crawling towards the officers. It was really Daniel something, really, really horrendous case. And the officer shot him with I think it was an AR-15, shot him. And on the side of his gun, it said, "You're effed," right? Sort of carved into the handle of the gun, or into the ejection area of the firearm. It said, "You're effed," right? It's spelled out, obviously. And the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, they prosecuted this officer. They fired him, and then they let him come back on, and so that he could resign, so he could collect his pension for the next 25 years or whatever it was. And they found, and the jury found him not guilty. And the prosecutors, in my opinion, it felt like to me like they just sort of threw the case, right? They just kind of said, well, we're going to go through the motions on this thing. But if it were not an officer, they would have been extremely aggressive, right? If this was some gangbanger who shot somebody else, they would bend over backwards. They would do everything humanly possible to make sure they got a conviction on that case. That same type of anger, that same type of sort of resolve, that energy when a cop is the defendant just doesn't exist. So going through the motions, well, Your Honor, we're kind of here, we're just kind of coloring within the lines. And it's just very formulaic, and then nothing happens to that cop, right? He gets a not guilty. So you could easily see something like that happening here. Now, this was in Arizona, a white cop on a white guy. And so I don't think it got the same amount of sort of national exposure or outrage as George Floyd would be. So to say that a prosecutor would throw that case would be, very, very presumptuous. But we'll see. And it may not be a great case. We just don't know yet. Are they going to be able to come back and show that there was another cause of George Floyd's death that wasn't Derek Chauvin's knee? We don't know. We got Nadarb says, I do remember seeing an interview of a woman who owns this club in Minnesota, said they worked together at her club doing security or something, but never heard much of it after that. Not sure on the accuracy of it, though. Yeah, I recall seeing some indication that they knew each other. Daniel Shaver, there it is. Yeah, Daniel, there it is. Daniel Shaver, that happened in your neck of the woods. Thank you for that, Nadarb. Yeah, awful case. I mean, one of the most senseless police shootings that I've seen recently, and it was just very gruesome. If you want to be sick to your stomach about what cops do to people and get away with, go look up the Daniel Shaver case. That cop is still free, and he's collecting a pension from the Mesa City Police Department. So, write to your Mesa people if you are in Mesa and you're disgusted with that case, as you should be. Thank you, Nadarb, for triggering my memory. We have Danny Girl says, watching your show has changed my perception in the police as well. I don't think they should be defunded, but some kind of reform needs to happen. I literally cried when that poor 9-year-old girl who was clearly had a dysfunctional family was mistreated by those officers. Yeah, Danny, it's kind of like, it's sort of like, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, like waking up out of the Matrix, as youth, as kids, even myself, when I went to law school, I wanted to be a prosecutor. I thought that the police could do no wrong, right? They're just men and women who are heroes. They want to save all of us. And I just was sort of indoctrinated with that every day. Police, they're great. They're heroes. Every day on the news, hey, police, right? Everything is good and favorable until you get into it. And then you just realize it's just like anything else. They're bad lawyers, bad doctors, bad teachers, bad repairmen, everything. There's a lot of bad cops, and they've got a lot of institutional protections that allow them to sort of operate under the radar, where in many other industries I would be disbarred, a doctor would be delicensed, a repairman would be fired. I mean, the police just kind of escape some of the same punishment that many other people would ordinarily get, and the repercussions of some of their harm is just so catastrophic that it's hard to ignore. And I don't like to sort of come off as somebody who is anti-police. I do not think that all cops are bad, but there are some that are bad, and we have to deal with them. And so, you know, when we have these discussions, I always kind of feel bad when I hear from people saying, you know, you kind of woke me up a little bit on this stuff. It's like, you know, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I know it stinks. I know this world is just not so good in some areas. You sort of went to bed at night thinking, hey, you know, I can just call 911 and they're going to come and save me. Now, maybe that's not the best idea, you know, for every situation. So sorry about that, Danny girl, but I'm glad you are still here and with us. We've got another one from Jack Elias says, I suspect from what I have read about Chauvin that he is the kind of contrarian that if you told him something like, you are killing him, he would keep doing that. He would show that to show those ignorant civvies. I really think that the death happened out of his reaction to the public's pressuring him. It's a good point. I think the resulting death was unintended, but the actions that led to it were response in the moment. If that is the case, what class of homicide would they be? And why? So good question, Jack Elia. I don't have the Minnesota statutes in front of me. We did go through them back. I think it was May something when George Floyd was killed, and we went through them at length in prior videos. But it's a good question, right? I mean, a lot of cops respond that way, and I think that they're sort of trained to do that. You know, if the public is encroaching on you, you got to go back them up, and there's good reason for that. Right? You don't want a civilian coming in and interfering with a formal police investigation or formal procedures. But the problem here, I think, was that George Floyd was literally dying under his knee, and the knee restraint was totally outside of policy. So he's not protected by the ordinarily by qualified immunity or any of those other principles because he was acting outside of the scope of his formal procedures. When the trial goes forward, we'll pull up the statutes. I'll pull up the official charges. We'll go through them, and it'll be a detailed analysis. We're going to be talking about a lot of George Floyd. We're going to intersperse, of course, other topics. I don't want this to be a George Floyd channel, but we are going to talk about the highlights of the trial. So we're going to get into that when the time comes. We have One Drop says, after watching all the footage, he is going to be acquitted. He will walk because he followed his training. Show me where he broke protocol and he will go to jail. But it doesn't look that way, in my opinion. So there you go, right? That's an alternative interpretation. And to be honest, I haven't seen much indication about what his defense is going to look like. But if they can make an argument that he was acting within the purview of the official police procedures there in Minneapolis, that's a pretty good defense, right? I think we looked at the use of force policy from Minnesota, and I wasn't sure that a neck restraint, like a knee on the neck restraint, was in there. But there may have been something close, like a knee on the back or something like that. And so, if they can sort of connect the two, then maybe that'll be the claim. I think the stronger claim for from a defense perspective is the drugs, that he had too much fentanyl in his system. And that was the cause of death, right? He was probably going to die anyways, is going to be their defense. And Derek Chauvin didn't ultimately cause it, will be their defense. Now, that if that happens, this country is not going to be happy about it. Ham-handed says the original coroner's report called it a drug overdose, but with pressure from the governor and local officials, it was changed to unknown. Knee on the side of the neck will not kill you. So there's another one from Ham-handed. Yeah, and I think I saw that. Did the defense do their own autopsy? Were there multiple autopsies? It'd be interesting if there were competing reports. So, ham-handed, I think that you could probably die from a knee on the side of your neck, right? If it's cutting off your circulation, if you're blacking out, if you cannot breathe, if it's clamping down on your trachea and you cannot inhale, then I'm pretty sure I could kill somebody with a knee on the neck. I don't intend to ever do that, nor would I want to do that, but I could probably figure that out, right? So I think that you could probably make that link. But I don't know if that was the actual cause of death, right? Because if that was the cause of death, then it would be from asphyxiation. It would be from not being able to breathe. Because if you cut off the blood circulation, you'll just black out. If you do that for 9 minutes, maybe you have somebody without blood to the brain. Maybe they have like a stroke or something to that effect. We'll see. It's going to be a little bit of a battle of the experts. So the defense is going to bring their experts and say, no, it was a drug overdose. It was not asphyxiation. It wasn't anything to do with Chauvin's knee. On the other side, you're going to have the prosecutors, presumably, who are going to come in and say, no, he was but it's going to be about causation. This is going to be a causation trial. Who was responsible for the death? Was it George Floyd by ingesting drugs? Was it Derek Chauvin with the knee on the neck? Ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to. We'll see where that goes. We have the last one from Nadarb, says chauvinism, the irrational belief in the superiority or dominance of one's own group or people. Yeah, I think you're talking about the police. You might be talking about me, maybe. I don't know. I'm just gonna presume that you're talking about the police. So I think this is pretty normal. I see a lot of this from the police. You always see one of the most offensive things that they do, honestly, I would say outside, of course, killing people, is the promotion of the blue line American flag. I cannot stand that. And I see it a lot, actually. A lot of cops do this. They put the thin blue line flag on the back of their car, almost like that's more sacrosanct than the original flag. Almost like the thin blue line supersedes the American flag. And I'm thinking, no, that's not the way that works. Okay, we got a Constitution that says we got the 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment. We've got search and seizure protections. We've got right to counsel protections, right against self-incrimination protections, and on and on and on. All sorts of due process protections and all that stuff. That is symbolized in the American flag. For you to come in and put your thin blue line across it and make it a black flag with a blue line is offensive to me. But that's just me. All right. That was our last question on that segment. All right. The last thing we want to talk about is the No Glory for Hate Act. This is H.R. 484. This was submitted over by Representative Linda Sanchez over from California. It's a very appropriate title. No Glory for Hate Act. This was introduced on January 25th, 2021, and it is currently sitting in a number of different committees. It's sitting at the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee right now, and on February 4th, it was referred to the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management. So this is from the congressional website, and they're saying right now it's introduced. So this is still in the very early stages, but it was an interesting congressional bill that I learned about today, and so I wanted to share it with you. The No Glory for Hate Act. What could we possibly be talking about? So these were the co-sponsors who signed on to it. We've got a number of different representatives. Somebody here from Arizona, Ruben Gallego. We've got Georgia. Most people are coming from California. 4 from California, 2 from Illinois, 1 from Arizona. We got Connecticut, Georgia, Indiana, Oregon, Texas, and Virginia are all co-sponsors to this bill, which means we're gonna see some activity on it. Remember last week we talked about HR something or other that was the gun rights, the gun registry, the sort of we're gonna take everything related to guns away from you, whatever that bill was. Not a lot of activity on that. Remember we talked about that in context of what Joe Biden had announced after the Parkland shooting. And so this is a different issue, of course. This is No Glory for Hate, and it's going to be addressing presidents, so presidential behavior and some of the presidential benefits that you get. And so this one actually does have activity. I want to show you. Look here, it's been referred to a number of different committees, the Oversight Committee, Transportation Committee, and then it was also referred to the Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management Subcommittee, and that happened on February 4th. So this is something that we may actually see some activity on. This might actually become law. And so I want to run through it. It's H.R. 484, the 117th Congress, first session, H.R. 484, to prohibit the use of federal funds for the commemoration of certain former presidents and for other purposes. So who on earth could they be talking about? Does anybody have a guess on what this could be? All right, let's go through it. January 25th, it was introduced into the House, signed off on by all of these Congress people over there. And so it says here, this is a bill to prohibit the use of federal funds for the commemoration of certain former presidents. Be it enacted in the Senate and the House of Representatives in this Congress assembled, this act may be cited as the No Glory for Hate Act. All right, what's inside? Section 2, federal funds restrictions on commemorations and commemorating certain former presidents. Notwithstanding section whatever, no federal funds may be used to, number 1, create or display any symbol, monument, or statute commemorating any former president that has been twice impeached by the House of Representatives. No statutes, no monuments, no symbols can be installed using federal funds commemorating any former president who has been impeached twice. Can you think of anybody who that might be? I think there's only one person in this country that this is applicable to, on or before the date of enactment of this act, or has been convicted of a state or federal crime relating to the actions taken in an official capacity as the president on public federal lands. Okay, so obviously they're talking about Donald Trump. We all know that. Section number 2. Name, they may not use federal funds to name, designate, or redesignate a federal building or federal land after or in commemoration of any former president that has been twice impeached by the House of Representatives on or before the date that this was enacted. So no statutes, no symbols, no funds commemorating the president. You also can't name anything after a former president who has been twice impeached. So, if you want to rename an airport, or if you want to rename a building, right, or create a park somewhere, can't name it after any president who has been twice impeached. Then we get to Section 3. Restriction on federal funds for property bearing the names of certain former presidents. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, no federal funds or federal financial assistance may be provided to a state or a political subdivision or any entity which will be used for the benefit of building any land, structure, installation, or any other property that bears the name or is named or designated in commemoration of any former president who has been twice impeached. Okay, so federally, no statutes, no naming, and you also cannot fund states to name. So they're making sure that he can't do an end run around the federal government and go directly to the states. Then we have the Former President's Act restriction. Notwithstanding any act entitled here, it says any former president that has been twice impeached. Let me see here. An act to provide retirement, clerical assistance, and free mailing privileges to former presidents of the United States, commonly known as the Former President's Act. Any former president that has been twice impeached by the House or actions taking is not entitled, is not entitled to receive any benefit other than Secret Service protection under the act. So any of those things, right? No retirement money, no clerical assistance, no free mailing privileges, all revoked. You only get Secret Service protection. And then prohibition of burial of certain former presidents. And carrying out paragraphs 1 and 2, the Secretary of Defense shall not approve a determination of eligibility for internment or interment at the Arlington National Cemetery for any former president that has been twice impeached. No statutes, no money, no states, no mail. You don't even get to be buried. Okay, so you could get into the analysis of a bill of attainder. You could talk about all of that stuff, but they're mad. They are very mad that they did not get him impeached, aren't they? They are doing anything they can to try to stick it to old Donald Trump. You would think that in the interest of unity, like Joe Biden claims to want, that they would just sort of move beyond this. He was not convicted. He was acquitted. You may disagree with that outcome, but that's the reality. And they're still trying to penalize him. You would imagine that there are better things to do with your time if you're in Congress, other than passing bills like this that just seem very petty to me, but what do I know? All right, let's take our last locals.com questions. By the way, if you want to ask questions, it's locals.com/watchingthewatchers. Head on over there. If you're a supporter, you can ask questions, which I'm going to get to right now. Jack Elias says, if there is to be no glory for hate, then the proponents of the bill are the most deserving of its application. Ooh, that was spicy. Jack Elias, I like that. Right? Yeah, they're pretty hateful right now. They're pretty full of it. Can't be buried, no statues. I mean, they're trying to cancel him from his presidential benefits. Off Twitter, off Parler, off every other major tech platform. They're trying to kick him out of Mar-a-Lago. They also don't want him to be buried with other presidents. Okay. Wise one says, send that proposal to Texas. They need something to burn for heat. Yeah, I think that's great. We can just send all of these bills over to Texas and they can just light them on fire because that's about what they're worth. We got Sharon Quidney says, this bill is outrageous. It's directly and obviously targeting a single person. How is this legal? I don't think it is. How is this constitutional? I don't think it is. What hate are they talking about here? This is another disgusting display of partisan BS. Yeah, I mean, I think this falls into the category of a bill of attainder. You know, it's a specific bill that is set to impose penalties that are otherwise due to somebody, right? There's other law that gives Donald Trump the ability to claim those benefits, and he has served his part of that contract. Okay, he was a former president. He did his duty in the White House. You can disagree with his performance. You can say he's a treasonous, seditious, insurrectionist, whatever. But he still performed his duty. He left office according to the policies, according to the formalities. He complained a lot about it, but he was not found guilty of inciting insurrection. Hasn't been convicted of that in that kangaroo court or anywhere else. So he's still entitled to those benefits. What the legislature is trying to do is remove something that is already due to him. They're trying to penalize him for something that he's already earned. And they're doing it without going through a formal judicial proceeding. Okay, that's why we have courts, to determine whether or not somebody should have a benefit that is entitled to them removed from them. What they're trying to do is just pass it through the legislation, through the legislative branch. That's a bill of attainder. I don't think it's constitutional. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but they're just sort of throwing a temper tantrum. Just XUXA says all the D on this bill are acting like they're 12 years old. Yeah, they need to sit in timeout or be grounded. Yeah, it's just a temper tantrum. These people just go home and you can just see them. You can see steam coming out of their ears. Have you had conversations with people like this? You mentioned Donald Trump and they just instantly, it's like how, it's kind of hilarious. It's kind of hilarious. A little scary, but also kind of hilarious. Jack Elias says this is a direct attack on the Trump brand and also a practice of the European monarchies, which would outlaw family names in order to eradicate them. It sounds, I don't know much about the European monarchies, but that sounds exactly like this, right? They're trying to just make sure that he is not around on anything because they're that angry. Jeremy Matrita says, oh my God, these people, they're only accelerating their own demise. These people can't be voted out of office fast enough. Any public servant supporting this is not a public service. This makes me sick to my stomach. Yep, this is what our Congress people are doing. They're writing these bills and co-sponsoring it. And they're sending it to subcommittees, and they're studying this. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Well, I don't know, Jim. How about you, John? How about you, Mary? Okay. It's our elected officials. Sharon Quinney says, I say impeach these people sponsoring the bill. They are haters. They're suffering from a bad case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. They definitely are suffering from that. There's no question about it. We have Cody Bear, who says, I think Trump's face should be put on Mount Rushmore. Well, Cody, your wish is our command. Is that how that goes? Here it is. Jeremy Matrita in the House. Put Donald Trump over there. Oh, that's going to trigger some people. That's fun. We have Jack Elias says, no Trump library. Is there enough paper to print all the tweets? Yeah. What I think Time. I think it was New York Times. Somebody assembled all of his tweets into a just a collage. It's actually really impressive. It might have been the Washington Post, one of the big newspapers. They assembled all the tweets. They put them all on like this one interactive board. Really impressive. And Donald Trump is one of the best, I think, tweeters of all time. I mean, all time. I think Kanye would agree with me on that. Danny Girl says, a group of baboons is called a Congress. It's all clear to me now. Let me move myself. A group of baboons is not a Congress, but it also disrespects baboons. Do not believe that the meme claiming a group of baboons is called a Congress. Not only is it wrong, but it also disrespects baboons. Oh, yes. I love it. Thank you, Danny Girl. We have Wise One says, do grandfather laws apply here like they did on the swing states for the elections? Yeah. So I don't think that this bill is going to go anywhere, but you know, it's just kind of stomping your feet. Oh, man. Oh, you know. All right. So let them do it. That's fine. Who cares? We have Realtor Patty 14 says, all they are doing is going to make Trump come back in 2024. You know, I don't have an opinion on it just yet. Right. I think Trump is quite toxic at the moment, but that could change in 3 years. And I've said before on this channel, anybody who's writing him off they don't know the man, right? They don't know what they're dealing with. I think there's probably a pretty strong likelihood he comes back. And I almost want him to do it just for the lulz, just for the amount of trigger that would be going on in this country. It's just ridiculous. It might be fun. Who knows? It might be a disaster. I don't know either, but we're going to see. We've got about 4 years to figure it out. All right. Last one from Croc 1 Alpha says they have already tried to ban Barron Trump from ever running. No barons allowed to hold office in the Republic, apparently. Honestly, folks, it would not surprise me at all. This is something that they are so hot over. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I've been alive for 35 years. I've been following politics for, I don't know, half that time. I told you yesterday, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh since I was a boy. I've been always kind of interested in it. Even though I didn't know what he was talking about, I thought it was very interesting, and he's still a big inspiration. I'm still kind of upset about that. I'll be upset about that for a little while. But yeah, it is something where they are trying to just completely erase him from the record of everything. And that's a little bit troubling to me, for somebody that hasn't been convicted of anything. All right. So as we all know, those questions came over from Locals, locals.com/watchingthewatchers. We have some awesome supporters over there. I want to thank some of you who have gone on over there to help us build a little bit of a platform. We've got Cat Crap Fever. We've got Al Huber. We got TCS Med Free. We have Larry Light. We got Rarer Texa, R Herrera Tex. We got Hack Consulting. We got ACWAC. Then we've got XN Drew. We've got Rolf77. We got Playin' Hooky #1. R Goodson 59. We got the Wise One. Saw him today. Jamie Boyd's in the house. Paula MK was also in the house today. We have Ugly Douglin. We got Raining Arrow. We have 111 Patriot. We have Jax 842. We got See the Veil. We got I'm a Lemon. We got a couple new people who signed on up, and we want to congratulate them for joining the best community on the internet. It is Shay O'Shea, and we got Fair_Dinkum. Fair Dinkum joining us over on locals.com. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for going and supporting us over there. If you want to go on over there, please feel free to do so as well. There's some good stuff that you can get. Of course, grab a copy of my book. It's called Beginning to Winning. There's a free PDF over on Locals. All this stuff is free whether you support the show or not. You can just go and check it out. Slides are available there as well. Copy of the impeachment party template is still available. We have the existence systems, which you can grab. Those are my personal productivity little system there. Made a video on January 1st. You can check that out. We share links. People post good stuff over there. There's great people, good people to connect with, like-minded people who value free speech first and foremost, and they're differing opinions over there. That's kind of what we want. We want to learn, have a dialogue. We can disagree without being disagreeable, can't we? That's what we're trying to build. We want to watch the watchers. We want to promote accountability and transparency, and we want to have a little bit of fun while we're doing it, learn some things, and meet some good people, and that's all taking place on locals.com/watchingthewatchers. So go check us out there. Lastly, before we sign off, I do want to remind you that I am a criminal defense attorney. That's my day job. I help good people who've been charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their lives. We have a whole team of people here. Our office is in Scottsdale. We offer free case evaluations. We can help anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, whether it's an open case or a closed case. If it's a closed case, maybe they have a warrant that they want to clean up. I'm sorry, that wouldn't be a closed case. That would be an open case. That's on warrant status. We can help them move that along. If it is closed, we can move to set aside their conviction. If it's an old marijuana conviction, we have Prop 207, which just passed, which gives us a lot of tools so we can clear that record up, expunge it completely. We can help remove mugshots off the internet. We can restore rights. There's a lot that we can do to help. And we believe in it. We're very passionate about it. It's sort of the reason we do this show, is to help educate people about what's going on in our justice system and make sure that people know about their rights and about how to navigate it appropriately so that they don't come out the other end just ground to a pulp by our police, politicians, prosecutors, and judges. So if you know anybody who is in need of those services, we would be humbled and honored and grateful if you sent them our direction, because they will leave better than they found us. We'll be sure of that. So that's it for me, my friends. I want to thank you for diving into it, all of this with us today. We covered a lot today. We're going to do it again tomorrow. Going to be back here at the same time, same place. That is going to be 5 p.m. Arizona time, which is Mountain. We have 4 p.m. in California on the West Coast, 6 p.m. in Texas, which is Central Time, and then 7 p.m. on the East Coast for Florida Man. And those of you out there, I want to thank you once again for being a part of the show. I will see you back here, same time, same place tomorrow. Bye-bye.